My daughter's 8 years old, and she already has her Christmas list. You know, I get a little bit of a panic because you cannot screw up talking to Santa.
Oh, Tom and Suri!
For years, people have wondered why famous action movie star Tom Cruise has such an estranged relationship with his daughter. Today, Suri Nally, who recently turned 19, has come out to speak about her relationship with her father and building a life away from him. What she revealed was something so shocking and devastating than anyone could have imagined. What did she say, and how has it affected how people see her father? Join us as we dive into this story. The secret behind the estranged relationship between Suri and Tom Cruise. For most of her life, Suri Noelle has been estranged from her father, Tom Cruise. After his unfortunate separation from her mother, Katie Holmes, when Suri was barely 6 years old, the action movie star seemed to have cost everywhere, but in his daughter's life. By the time Suri Noelle, formerly Suri Cruise, reached her early teens, her memories of her father had faded into fragments. The last time she felt like part of a complete family existed somewhere before age 6. She watched Tom Cruise's career continue to soar. She saw him praised for his discipline, his commitment, his devotion to belief. She watched him risk his life for entertainment. What she did not receive were birthday calls, school visits, and his physical presence. However, the most shocking thing was not known until a few years ago. In 2013, reports surfaced that Tom had only seen Suri once since the divorce. After that, there were no confirmed visits, no photos or sightings. To the public, it was a mystery. Despite having the option to build a relationship with his daughter, Tom Cruise did not. Although most people expected their relationship to get better as Suri got older, reality turned out to be more devastating than anyone had imagined. As the years passed, Suri learned not to ask questions out loud. She sensed that some topics carried weight her mother struggled to hold. Katie focused on creating normalcy, school routines, home-cooked meals, walks through the city. Stability became the priority. What Katie did not do was speak badly about Tom. She did not poison her daughter's memories. She did not frame him as cruel or heartless. She left space for Suri to form her own understanding. That space, however, was filled with silence. But why would a father completely ignore the existence of a child he had once shown love beyond anything else? No one could put their hands on the reason Tom had completely walked away from his daughter, but there were a few speculations. According to insiders, Tom's attitude to his daughter had everything to do with his religion as Suri will likely never have a relationship with Tom, one former friend of the action star said, citing that when Katie left, Tom was around the time that Suri would have been sent off to Scientology school, and Katie wasn't having that. The friend revealed something even more devastating, that if you're not a Scientologist, other Scientologists can't associate with you, even if you're their child. Despite these criticisms, Tom Cruise insists that he did not abandon his daughter. In 2012, he brought actions against 2 U.S. magazines that claimed he abandoned Suri, who was 6-year-old at that point, in the wake of a split from her mother, the actor Katie Holmes, earlier that year. The Top Gun and Mission Impossible star's lawyer Burt Fields confirmed his client had filed a $50 million lawsuit against Life and Style and In Touch magazines, both of which are owned by the Bauer Publishing Group.
Go back, please.
For defamation. The articles in question appeared on the front cover of the 30th July issue of Life and Style, headlined, "Suri in Tears, Abandoned by Her Daddy," and on the front of the 1st October issue of In Touch, headlined, "Abandoned by Daddy." The lawyer claimed that Tom was a caring father who loved his child dearly, and to say he abandoned his daughter would be reprehensible and libelous. He cited that, legally, he did his part. After the divorce, Cruise agreed to pay $400,000 a year towards Suri's upbringing. There has been no reporting that he failed to meet that obligation. However, money does not equate presence. True to those words in the publications, Cruise hasn't been seen or photographed with Suri Cruise in over a decade, preferring to lavish attention on his two adopted children with Nicole Kidman, Isabella, and Connor. Instead, both Isabella and Connor are deeply involved in Scientology. Holmes's decision to leave the marriage, secure primary custody, and enroll Suri in private school was described by Tony Ortega, a journalist who majors in researching Scientology and Vanity Fair, as a massive public relations disaster for both Cruise and Scientology. Within the church's framework, her actions would typically trigger disconnection. That means members cutting off contact. The rules are brutal and enforced, but Cruise is not a typical member. His celebrity status brought him exceptions. According to Ortega and Vanity Fair, he was, in fact, given the option to maintain a relationship with his daughter. Yet Tom doesn't seem to be making any effort to be a part of Suri Cruise's life. While Suri Cruise graduated from high school, he attended a Taylor Swift performance in London instead. This summer, as she prepares for her freshman year at Carnegie Mellon, he was all over the Olympics in Paris, posing with athletes and preparing for his stunt, instead of being there for his daughter. The option to be part of her life existed, but the star actor has chosen his religion over his daughter, yet Cruise says he never abandoned his daughter. Both things can technically coexist, but emotionally, they do not sit in the same room. Nevertheless, Suri's actions suggest she no longer expects him to show up. Furthermore, Cruise's absence from Suri's graduation did not land quietly. It landed like a public verdict. Cameras clocked who showed up and who did not. And the internet did what it always does. It connected dots, sharpened opinions, and asked the question no one in that family ever answers out loud. Where is Tom Cruise when it actually counts? But his absence was not the only big news that came from that act. The next revelation was shocking. While people were wondering why Tom Cruise failed to show up, another bombshell was dropped. The graduation program listed the graduate not as Suri Cruise, but as Suri Noelle. That's right, she was no longer using her father's surname. She had instead chosen to go by just a first name and her mother's middle name, a choice deliberately displayed to the public to show where she stood in the strange relationship with her father. According to page 6, the name was a tribute to Katie Holmes, the woman who raised her in New York City after the divorce, the woman who did the school runs, the parent-teacher meetings, the ordinary work of parenting that never trends. Whether the name change has been made legal is still unclear. What is clear is intent. Sources say Suri wanted her own identity and a fresh start as she heads to college. That explanation sounds polite, almost corporate. She did not want to carry a name that came with expectations, explanations, or silence. She wanted space from her disappointing father. That choice lands harder when placed next to another uncomfortable report. Insiders quoted by The Sun claim Cruise has not seen his daughter in 11 years. The number matters because it is long enough to stop being a rough patch and start being a pattern. It is also long enough for a child to grow up without you. Meanwhile, social media slammed Cruise and his stunt of not attending the graduation. But how did Tom Cruise end up becoming estranged from his family? The truth is nothing but shocking. The world saw the birth of a celebrity baby and the glamorous marriage. However, behind the scenes, something shocking was going on. Katie Holmes, who was still a practicing Scientologist at the time of Suri's birth, had followed Scientology's silent birth practice, a belief held within the church that noise and emotional expression during labor can cause spiritual harm. Former Scientology members have spoken about this practice publicly in interviews with ABC News, The Hollywood Reporter, and other outlets. Katie later admitted that this experience was not empowering. It was something she endured due to Tom Cruise and his devotion to the religion. The delivery room was quiet in a way that did not feel natural. Her pain was suppressed, and her instincts were overridden. Suri had been ushered into a world where control mattered more than comfort, where belief mattered more than emotion. But the rumor of the painless birth was not all there was. There were also whispers that Scientology frowns on giving painkillers to women in labor, and that Katie Holmes was forced to deliver her baby without an epidural, a painful process that many media outlets labeled as horrifying. However, in an interview with ABC News, the Mission Impossible star later explained the term and fought to take away the stigma behind the concept of the silent birth. The actor revealed it was a respect to the birth mother, where the people around the birthplace had to keep quiet and help to be quiet. According to the actor, the silent rule did not apply to the mother, who was allowed to make as much noise as possible as she was going through it. He debunked the rumor about epidurals too, assuring the media that Katie did, in fact, get an epidural during the birth of Suri. Suri's birth was not a moment of joy captured in family photos. It was a warning sign, one that would only make sense years later. In her early years, Suri lived inside a carefully crafted image. She appeared alongside her parents on red carpets. She wore designer outfits chosen by famous stylists. She traveled between lavish homes under heavy security. But behind closed doors, cracks were already forming. Friends of Katie later told Vanity Fair that her freedom had quietly narrowed. She rarely went anywhere alone. Scientology associates were almost always present. Conversations felt watched. Decisions felt guided. Katie's parents reportedly became concerned. They sensed that their daughter was slowly losing control over her own life. She and Suri were always surrounded by Scientology associates who moved like silent shadows, monitoring her movements as if she were living under an unspoken surveillance. Still, Suri didn't know any of that. What she knew were footsteps in the hallway, movie nights with her parents, warm arms lifting her up, and a father who seemed larger than life. But when she turned 6, the footsteps stopped. The house went quiet. Yet for Katie, leaving was not simple. This was not just a marriage. It was a public relationship which had blossomed under the critical eye of the public. Suri, however, was unaware of any of this. She only knew love as it appeared to her. She remembered being held. She remembered laughter. She remembered a father who felt enormous and exciting and real. That is what made what came next so devastating. The divorce that changed everything. In June 2012, Katie Holmes filed for divorce. The timing shocked Hollywood. It came days before Tom Cruise's 50th birthday and moved with shocking speed. Within 11 days, the divorce was finalized. But the speed with which they divorced was not the only reason their split was so shocking. In 2005, Katie Holmes and Tom Cruise did not look like a couple headed for collapse. They looked like a Hollywood fairy tale in real time. Cruise was already one of the most powerful actors in the world, a seasoned A-lister with decades of box office dominance behind him. Holmes was America's sweetheart, best known for her role on Dawson's Creek, with a wholesome image and a career still unfolding. When they began dating, the public was instantly obsessed. They did not hide their excitement. In fact, they leaned into it. Cruise's now infamous appearance on the Oprah Worry-Free Show became a cultural moment that still follows him today. Overcome with emotion, he jumped on the couch and declared his love with the intensity of someone who believed he had found something life-altering. At the time, it looked romantic, but looking back, it looked like a warning sign. Holmes, swept up in the momentum of the relationship, began opening herself to Cruise's world. That world included Scientology. In interviews that year, she spoke enthusiastically about auditing and courses, describing the religion as helpful and exciting. To the public, it seemed like curiosity. To those familiar with the church, it looked like the first step into something far more binding. By June 2005, Cruise proposed. By April 2006, Suri was born. 7 months later, they married in an extravagant ceremony at Odescalchi Castle in Italy. The guest list was elite and the wedding spectacle was enormous. However, the symbolism of Cruise's religion was unmistakable. David Miscavige, the leader of the Church of Scientology, stood beside Cruise as his best man. But the peace would not last. Not long after the wedding glow faded, rumors began to circulate. Tabloids reported that Cruise exerted significant control over Holmes's career. Projects she once might have pursued quietly disappeared. Roles dried up. Her presence in Hollywood dimmed. Both Holmes and Cruise publicly denied any interference, but the pattern was hard to ignore. A once busy actress had quietly stepped out of the spotlight. Then, after 7 years of marriage, everything imploded. In June 2012, Holmes went ahead to file for divorce. The move stunned Cruise. It moved with shocking speed, ending in just 11 swift days. The public was told this was a private matter, and that Holmes's only concern was her daughter's best interest. That line was repeated often. At the time, it sounded like the couple were grieving the loss of their union. But as years went by, the public would find out the shocking details behind the strategy Cruise used in his divorce with Katie. Cruise later admitted the divorce blindsided him. In a 2013 interview with German television, he spoke vaguely about life's unpredictability, calling it a tragicomedy, and suggesting the split hit him harder than expected. But what he never explained was why Holmes felt the need to leave so suddenly, so quietly, and so completely. The answer, many believe, lies with Scientology. For years, the church had been shrouded in secrecy, but cracks began forming as former members started speaking out. No voice was louder or more consistent than Leah Remini's. Having been involved in Scientology since childhood, Remini left the church in 2013, citing concerns for her daughter's well-being. In the years that followed, she accused the organization of abuse, intimidation, and surveillance, allegations she later formalized in a lawsuit. Remini offered a crucial perspective on Holmes' departure. In interviews, she admitted she had underestimated the pressure Holmes was under. She acknowledged that Katie Holmes likely understood far more about the inner workings of Scientology than anyone realized, and that her decision to leave was not impulsive. It was protective. According to Remini, Holmes was trying to save her daughter, Suri, and ended up sacrificing her marriage in the process. Once the public learned of this, it reframed everything. The divorce was not a breakdown of love. It was an extraction from the control of a religion that felt suffocating. Behind the scenes, Holmes was reportedly planning her escape with extreme care. Her father, Martin Holmes, an attorney, allegedly played a key role. Sources at the time claimed he helped his daughter sever digital ties, replacing phones and email addresses to prevent tracking or interference. Friends suddenly could not reach her. Even people close to her were cut off. These were not the actions of a woman leaving a marriage on a whim. These were the actions of someone who believed she was in danger of losing control over her child. Reports suggested Holmes chose New York deliberately, knowing its custody laws favored stability and routine. But that was not all. She filed while Cruise was overseas filming Oblivion, minimizing the chance of immediate resistance. According to those familiar with the situation, she may have agreed to strict silence regarding Scientology and senior members in exchange for full custody of Suri. But another shocking detail existed. Katie Holmes has never publicly criticized Scientology. She has never accused Cruise of abuse. She has never spoken in detail about the marriage. Her restraint has often been mistaken for neutrality. In reality, it may have been the price she had to pay in order to have freedom and keep her child. When the divorce was finalized, Holmes got what she wanted: full custody and control over her daughter's upbringing, the ability to raise Suri outside Scientology. Surprisingly, Cruise faded out of Suri's daily life almost immediately. Whether by choice, belief, or obligation, the result was the same. A child grew up without her father present. Not because of distance or because of money, but because crossing the divide would have required choosing between faith and family. At 6 years old, Suri did not understand legal filings or settlement terms, but she understood silence and absence. The house that once echoed with movement suddenly felt empty. Her father was gone from her daily life without explanation. There were no gradual changes, no gentle transition. One day he was there, the next day he was not. For a child, that kind of disappearance does not register as abandonment at first. Unfortunately, Tom Cruise did not stop there. In a bid to protect her, Holmes never explained this to her daughter outright. She shielded her instead. She allowed Suri to grow without the burden of adult truths until she was strong enough to face them. And that decision, more than any headline or interview, explains why the silence between father and daughter lasted so long. For Suri, the move was disorienting. Her father still existed everywhere she looked. Movie posters, television screens, magazine covers. He simply no longer existed beside her. This is the kind of contradiction that confuses a child. How can someone be everywhere and nowhere at the same time? However, most people expected that as the child got older, that Tom Cruise would be more present in her life, but the reality was nothing but shocking. Suri's opinion on her father's actions. When Suri Noelle finally broke the silence on her strange relationship with action movie star Tom Cruise, it did not come out as a tell-all interview or a dramatic press conference. There was no prime-time slot, no carefully negotiated exclusive. What surfaced instead was quieter and more unsettling, a controlled leak of sorts, a version of events attributed to Suri herself, described by people who claim to have heard her speak plainly for the first time about her father. No recording exists, no transcript has been published, but across multiple sources, the account is consistent enough to feel deliberate. According to people familiar with the situation, Suri did not describe her relationship with Tom Cruise as strained or complicated. She described it as functionally absent, not in the way public figures often mean when they talk about distance or busy schedules, but in the way children mean when a parent becomes theoretical. She allegedly said there were years when she stopped expecting calls because expecting them hurt more than the silence. That she learned early not to mention school events, performances, or milestones because they were met with vague encouragement instead of presence. That the disappointment became routine enough to stop registering as anger. What struck listeners was that her voice had no bitterness. All that existed was detachment. One source described it as a daughter speaking about a man she knew intellectually, not emotionally. A famous face, a name on documents. Someone whose absence required explanation to others but had already been accepted privately. The most devastating part, according to those accounts, was not what Cruise did but what he did not do. Suri allegedly said there was never a final fight, never a moment where she felt rejected outright. There was simply a gradual understanding that she existed outside the priorities that governed his life. Shockingly enough, she did not accuse him of cruelty. She did not describe shouting or abuse. What she described was something harder to argue against: indifference wrapped in formality. Sources say Suri spoke about communication that came through intermediaries rather than directly, messages relayed, updates filtered, gifts that arrived without follow-up, money without memory attached to it. She allegedly said it felt like being managed, not parented. At one point, she reportedly questioned whether she was allowed to want more from her father. Those close to Suri say she became acutely aware, as she grew older, that her life and her father's life operated in parallel, rather than intersection. She watched him speak passionately about work, about belief systems, about legacy. She noticed how rarely she appeared in that language. The name change at her graduation, in this telling, was not impulsive. It was the endpoint of a long internal process. Suri allegedly said she did not drop her father's surname out of anger. She dropped it because it did not reflect the relationship she actually had with him. She reportedly described the name as heavy, not because of fame, but because it carried an assumption of closeness. She felt pressured to perform. Teachers, peers, even strangers assumed access, warmth, and a bond. She said correcting them became exhausting. By using Noelle, Katie Holmes' middle name, Suri felt aligned with the person who had been consistently present. Not perfect, not flawless, but there. The parent who knew her routines, her fears, her rhythms. The one whose love did not require interpretation. Despite his faults, how Suri feels towards her father is quite shocking. Suri allegedly said she does not hate her father. She does not seek to punish him. She does not want apologies delivered through headlines. What she wants, she said, is the freedom to define herself without carrying someone else's unfinished story. The 19-year-old was recently spotted riding the NYC subway, just like everyday commuters, after returning home from her university in Pittsburgh. Last year, it was reported that Suri Cruise gained access to her father, Tom Cruise's, substantial trust fund. However, the reports were later refuted by her mom, Katie Holmes, in a post on Instagram. Living far from the glitz and glamour of her famous father, Tom Cruise, Suri opted for a humble subway ride in NYC after returning from college in Pittsburgh. seemingly proving she has a normal life despite the actor's $600 million net worth. The trust fund was said to have been established by her estranged father as part of the divorce deal he reached with Suri's mother, Katie Holmes, when they separated in 2012. It was also reported that the teenager will gain full access in her 30s, and it was set up this way to keep her from getting overwhelmed by her newfound wealth. However, that seems to be far from the truth. Right after the news went viral, Holmes refuted the claims in a post on her Instagram page. Completely false, the actress penned boldly on a screenshot of the article. Daily Mail, you can stop making stuff up. She also expressed her frustration with the outlet in the caption, writing, "Enough." Following the post, fans supported the actress for calling out the outlet over its claims. They praised her for always standing up for her daughter despite everything that came with it. What do you think of Tom Cruise's estrangement from his daughter? Do you think Suri's decision to change her name was good? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the following video shown on your screen. You will enjoy.